Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with just a little bit of a roundup for the end of the year. Now I hope you've all had a good Christmas for those that celebrate Christmas and you're all enjoying the festivities. I've been working really hard to get all the projects finished for the end of the year and we wanted to share those with you in a video today. So the first quilt we're going to show you is something I did way back in the summer, and it was the Curvy log cabin. The fabric I used was a scrap bag and it was called Buttercup and Slate for coriander quilts for Moda, and we used the Creative Grids Curvy log cabin trim tool to make these blocks. Now I think last time you saw it we had the 16 blocks of the centre just sewn together, so since then I've added 1.5 inches, and that's cut size border onto that, and then I chose this lovely yellow which I thought matched in with the yellows in this quilt really well. This is a Moda Bella Solid and it's called Canary, and I think I cut that at 3.5 inches to get a 3-inch finished border on that. Now the quilt size ended up being 32.5 inches square, and we used that same yellow for the backing and the binding. I just quilted this on my home sewing machine just using straight line quilting, about 1/2 inch apart all the way across, and then I just did a framing border in the inner and outside borders. So this was the Curvy log cabin. So the next project I managed to finish was the Friendship Star, and this one was an interlocked Friendship Star. Now we are going to put links to all of the videos where we did these projects. Now I think the last time you saw this was also where we just sewn the top together. So in the meantime I've quilted it, and I've done that on my embroidery machine at home using a swirls and stars pattern. So I'm really pleased with how this has come out. It's 17.5 inches by 21.5 inches. This I used just all my scraps, so even the binding came from my sort of leftover strips, and it's a scrappy binding, different blues. And on the back I just had a fat quarter that came out of my stash, which I thought matched in quite well with the blue and sort of the creamy colours on that. So this was the Friendship Star. So the next two projects, I actually had these finished before filming, and we did it as part of our Star Block series for the children's quilt we were doing with the different stars, and this was for the Sawtooth star. Now these were a couple of table runners that I made. Oh, I don't even know. One of them I think I made in 2020, and one of them might be a little bit before that. So these were just the table runners, and as I said, we will put a link in the description to the tutorial where we did these. On these I just quilted them with just a free motion stipple, and then just did a sort of a straight line border around. This one I sort of straight line bordered, but sort of horizontally rather than sort of a framing border as I call it. The blue one was made all from sort of scraps and bits and pieces that I had left over from some Christmas fabrics. And I actually think the red one was mostly from leftover bits of a charm pack, but I think I did throw in some other 2.5 inch squares from my 2.5 inch square box for that one as well. These came out measurement wise, they're about 14.5 inches wide by 35 inches tall, but of course you could just make more star blocks and make that as long as you like. So that was the Sawtooth Star. So the next project was also a finish we managed to do on air, and we did this in 3 parts, and it was our boat cushion. And we even looked at sort of some options for how to quilt it. Now this is a 16-inch cushion, this fits, and this fabric was Bon Voyage by Jeanette for Moda Fabrics. And if I turn it round, this was a fat quarter of the same fabric range, excuse me. And we did a little concealed zip in this, or a hidden zip. So in the tutorials I show you how to make this little flap to cover your zip. So that's all sort of nice and hidden, and it looks as lovely from the back as it does from the front. So that was our boat cushion project. So the next project was this little scrap block that we used. Now I just used all my different scrap strips for this one, and we used telephone directory pages to make this. Now it's 18 inches square, and I quilted it on my embroidery machine at home. For small projects I tend to do it on my embroidery machine if I can. Large projects I have to do it on my home sewing machine. I don't unfortunately have access to a long arm. So this was all made using my scraps, including the binding was a piece of fabric I had left in my scraps. I think the only thing I added was a fat quarter for the backing on this one. So this was a quick block to make using your scraps. So the next project we did was the red and white log cabin, and the fabric we used for this was Primitive Gatherings red and white gatherings. So we used a honey bun, so that's 1.5 inch strips, to make 16 blocks, which we put together. Now in the video we actually had lots of different settings that we can choose, and this was actually, at the time when I was laying all those blocks out, I didn't see this pattern emerge, but I did when I watched it back. So that's the one I chose to do this in. I added an 1.5 inch border for an inner border, and then a 4.5 inch wide for the outside borders, and these were fabrics that were also in this range. We've got that here on the bolt as yardage, so I added those in. The fabric I used on the back was burgundy. It's a Moda Bella Solid, which matched in really well. So this quilt came together really quite quickly. The quilting, I just echo quilted around some of the log shapes in the quilt itself, just a straight line quilting on my home sewing machine. And then I just did a framing border, a simple framing border for the outside. So that was the red and white log cabin quilt. So the next project we did was the scrappy On Point 9 patch table runner. These were used using a charm pack from Holly Taylor, but I actually mixed in another fabric from Holly Taylor's, which was from her shops on Main for the border. But that's what I really like about some of the fabric designers and some of the fabrics, is you can easily mix and match between the different ranges. I think this was a Christmas range from the previous year, and I had a charm pack of that I could use. So this ended up being 13.5 inches by 39, and I just quilted it by just doing a free motion and straight line quilting in the border. But I'm just going to take this down and show you what I did on the back. Now, I didn't have a backing fabric to match all this when I was putting this together. So I took my leftover charm squares from the pack and I just pieced the border, or the backing, sorry, and just put it all together. So you can see I sort of cut some of them in half and just sort of staggered them to make the backing, and that just helped use up all the remainders of those 5 inch charm squares, and also in effect could give you a double-sided runner if you wanted. So the next project we did was the attic window, and I'd made this small version before we filmed, and we were actually showing you how to do it on a smaller version, but we also had the top made on the green one. So this smaller version ended up being 25 inches square, and I just did some free motion in the border and sort of stitched in the ditch around some of the windows. And I actually used some of the fabric that was in the panel. We had this sleigh bells piece in the panel itself. The panel was from Henry Glass, and it was actually for cushion covers. And this one, we chopped up one of those squares and made it into a small attic window. And on the large one, we actually kept the squares for the cushion panel hole. I added this one, we did the border in a Peppermint Lane was the fabric, and the red went really well with the red in the panel. And on this one, we went green. So we added a green grunge, and there was a white grunge in here with black. And then this fabric here came from a fabric range called Merrymaking. So these were the two different attic windows. This large one finished at 46, and the smaller one, as I said, 25 inches square. So that was the attic windows. So the next project was the Christmas tree skirt. Now this was a range called Joyful Joyful, and we made the Christmas tree skirt using pinwheels and 9 patches. But in the tutorial, I gave you different options of what you could replace those out. And I know some viewers have made some of these because we've seen some of the pictures and they've come out brilliantly. So we did the Christmas tree skirt. I think last time you saw it, we'd machine sewn the binding down, so all I had to do was finish off the binding by hand, which was all done. Now I'm just going to point out another little detail I did with the ends of my ties. As many of you know, I do English paper piecing, so I just used little 1/2 inch hexagons and sewed them onto the ends of the ties I thought it sort of replicated the shape of the Christmas tree skirt, and just finished off the ends of the ties. So I just put, so it would have been 8, so 2 together for each end. So this one ended up at 40 inches, sort of from sort of side to side. And on the back, we just used a Modabella solid, particularly because we thought this was going to sort of go on the floor. So we didn't want to use anything too sort of fancy-schmancy on the back for that one. But we also did a bonus video of this little tabletopper, and this is 22 inches from sort of side to side. And we did it in the same way. We just used sort of smaller versions and 4 patches of, the pinwheel and 4 patches. But I'm just going to show you the back for what I did for the backing on this one, because I had some fabrics left. So I just cut them into sort of 5-inch squares. Or they may have been 5-inch squares. I can't remember now exactly. But anyway, they were 5-inch squares, and I just put them all together until I had a piece that was big enough to make the backing. And then that used up any sort of surplus bits of fabric. I think they came out, I think I was using a layer cake actually from memory now. It seems like such a long time ago. So these were finished. So that was another little bonus project, we had for the Christmas tree skirt and a table topper. But I also had a little bit more of the fabric left. So let me just go and grab something else to show you. So I sneakily made a cushion, and this was using the Curvy log cabin block, but using 2.5-inch strips. And I just put 4 of those together. I used some fabric as well to do a scrappy binding. And the blocks that I was demoing, and I was showing you all, I just made a couple more, and I actually turned the blocks into the backing for this as well. Just did sort of a faux edge, and I had to sew sort of bits of fabric together for some of this, and I had a little bit of this blue which came from the backing from that one, and I just did a simple envelope back on the cushion. Just free motioned the whole front of it, and put the binding on, and we've showed you how to do that in a tutorial for the boat cushion if you want to see how to put the binding on the edge of a cushion. But that was just another little project that I did, because I like to use up as much of the fabric as I can, just to use up all the leftover pieces from that. Now the next finish I had, and the next project we did, was the Friendship Star with the Irish chain. So this was the setting. So this was from the soiree layer cake that we had, that we were doing some children's quilts with. And I think last time you saw this, it was just the quilt top. So I've taken it away and finished it off and quilted it. And I just did a sort of a diagonal line, sort of quilting. It looks about 3/4 of an inch apart. And then I just did some free motion in the border. I didn't feel it needed too much quilting in the border, because it had quite a sort of busy border there with the balloon fabrics. So as I said, this was a layer cake called Soiree. And then on the backing, we just picked out a purple from the Bella Solids that matched in with the purple that was in the border fabric. So this was the Irish chain and Friendship Star quilt. So my next finish was our children's star quilt. Now, if you remember, way back in the summer, I had the idea that I would make some star blocks and put them together in a setting. At that point, I didn't know how I was going to set them together, but I had half an idea in my mind. And so we worked on all these different star blocks in a number of different tutorials. And then I think last time you saw this, we'd just put them all together in the setting with some 2.5-inch squares to sort of join it all together. We included a larger Lemoyne star there in the bottom right-hand corner. And then we have our Ohio stars, our 8-pointed stars, our Friendship stars, and our Sawtooth stars. So some of these were 6-inch and some of these were 8 inches. And then we had our large star down in the corner there. Now we just picked out a nice pink Modabella solid to go with this, because we wanted to pull the pink out from this quilt. And we chose the balloon fabric from the same range. And so this was Soiree, so this was our layer cake. So we got the small Irish chain and star quilt from this one, and this larger quilt from that one layer cake for all the different stars in that. And I had enough fabric left from the backing to sort of make that the binding as well, which I think really helps to bring the centre of the quilt out into the outside of the quilt as well. So we just put a small inner border and an outside border. I quilted this because I felt that this matched in very well with the Irish chain quilt, the children's Irish chain and star quilt. So I just quilted the centre the same way, with just sort of a half crosshatch, if you like, so just diagonal lines going in one way. But I also used free motion, and I actually had a stencil to do some of the free motion in the border, because this was a plain border, so I wanted to sort of jazz it up a little bit there and put a bit of interest into the border. This quilt ended up being 65 by 47, so quite a large quilt, quite a nice one, and I'm really pleased with how this one came out. So we're now down to our penultimate project, and I'm going to go on record by saying this is actually one of my favourites. There was two things in particular that I really loved by the time I got to the completed version of it, and this is one of them, and it's the rail fence quilt, and it's one we've done very recently. It came together really quickly, and after I quilted it, it's just so soft and snuggly, and I just really love the colours of it. And it was only a part jelly roll that I'd had my eye on here for quite a while, and I just really love how this has come out. So this ended up at 54.5 inches square. We made the 16 rail fence blocks, and we did these in these sets of 4, and then we added sashing and cornerstones. And there's a tutorial on both of those, how to actually do the blocks and then how to add the sashing and the cornerstones to it. Now we picked out one of the fabrics from the range for the backing, and I had enough on there to also include on the binding. And for this one, I just went simple for the quilting. I wanted something that had a bit of a curve in it to sort of balance the very straight lines of the rail fence. And all I did on this one is I literally just drew one sort of wavy line across the centre of the quilt, and then I just echoed that, working in both directions, going right across the quilt. So it's really simple quilting, just straight line on my home sewing machine. So as I said, this is one of my favourites. I'm so pleased with how it's come out, and it's the simple rail fence, and I'll definitely be making this one again. So I'm just going to finish by saying there was one other final project which we don't still have the sample here because we gave it away in a competition, and it was my other favourite project that I've done throughout the year, and that was the Drunkards Path, the little wall hanging Drunkards Path. And I liked it so much that I've actually bought myself the charm pack to recreate another one for myself. So I hope you enjoyed seeing all those projects that I managed to get to the finish line before the end of the year. I'd set myself a little target, and I'm pleased to report I managed to do that. If you've got a favourite, do leave a comment, or if you've made any of the projects which have been your favourites, do share your photos with us. We really appreciate all your support. If you've got anything you'd like to see me make next year, also please leave a comment, and we'll have a look at scheduling that in as well if we can. So all it leaves me to do is to wish everybody out there a very happy new year. We look forward to sewing with you in 2024.